we see an opportunity for a second lease of life of our E-Jet family of airplanes as freighters. But what a smaller capacity does is it allows you to go into tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities as well. So it increases the penetration that any operator or even the country can experience. If you look at India, India is 1,500 nautical miles north to south and 1,500 nautical miles east to west. A turboprop can fly only about something like 500 nautical miles, which does not cover the entire region. It's got small capacity. But then if you want to put a large narrow body like the 320 or 737, it can fly the distance, but then you can't fill it on all the routes. So this is a solution that comes in where if you go to smaller cities, it's easier to fill. Cost of operations is also lower, but it has the range to cover the whole of India and even fly to neighboring countries like the Middle East and Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Lipin Chakopurian from Stat Media Group. We are here in New Delhi right now at ACFI Annual Conclave 2023. With me right now is Vasuki Prasad. He is the Sales Director, Asia Pacific of Commercial Aviation at Embraer. Vasuki, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Can you give me an idea about what brings you to ACFI Annual Conclave?
So Embraer is very new into the whole cargo solution space. We've been a passenger solution focused company since a very long time. But now that we have the world's third most popular aircraft family, which is the E-Jets family of aircraft, and we also are the third largest manufacturer of aircraft in the world, we see an opportunity for a second lease of life of our E-Jet family of airplanes as freighters. And for us, a lot of the realization came in during COVID when there was a massive opportunity for cargo solutions, but airplanes were either too big or airplanes were too small with a very small range. So we come right in the center, and with this foray into the cargo side, it makes a lot of sense to be part of what probably would be the largest such event that you can have in India for the cargo space. So it's the right audience, and we believe we have a product that fits a good, nice niche.
Since your focus is on cargo and you are speaking at a panel on domestic Indian air cargo, can you give me an idea about what is your perspective about Indian air cargo, how bullish you are about the Indian air cargo, and about all the policy initiatives, particularly from the government side, for example, the Krishi Udan, or there is an infrastructure fight between, for example, the air side and the road transport, for example. Do you think road will take some cargo away from air cargo? How is it?
All right. So in terms of domestic cargo, right, there is a lot of bullishness, and that's because the GDP is growing. And typically with the growing GDP, a lot more opportunities do come up. And with these opportunities that do come up, you need greater penetration into India to further enhance the GDP. You need more last mile connectivity, you need greater penetration. If you're looking at most of the routes operated by most of the cargo aircraft, dedicated cargo freighters in India today, you have the mostly flying international, and those that fly domestic fly mostly to the metros. But what a smaller capacity does is it allows you to go into tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities as well. So it increases the penetration that any operator or even the country can experience. So with that, we are very bullish. The GDP is growing strong, one of the strongest growth. And with that, naturally, cargo is going to follow. And with the following cargo, you'll need more solutions for penetration, and that's where our bullishness is coming for the cargo space. Now, talking about the policies that are in, it's a very lovely policy that is instituted by the Minister of Civil Aviation through the Krishi Udan, right, where you have waivers on landing, parking charges, and so forth. We feel there could be a lot more done. And when I say a lot more done, it's not to do something new. It's to just take the best practices of a sister policy that already exists in the Indian government by the Minister of Civil Aviation, which is the RCS Udan for passenger. So you take the RCS Udan, which is for passenger transport, and you take some of the learnings into Krishi Udan, it may really help accelerate and open up more domestic cargo opportunities through air. And how is that? To remove the risk for an operator to start a new route for RCS Udan for passenger, the government gives you, in association with the state governments, gives you a viability gap funding for 50% of your seats up to 40 seats. And then you have reduction in fuel VAT, you have waiver on the landing navigation fees and all that stuff. But the biggest risk removal is you are getting the viability gap funding as a guaranteed revenue for every flight, whether you're able to fill the airplane or not. So that fear of the risk of not being able to fill your aircraft is reduced. If we come to Krishi Udan, there's no such thing. The risk of filling the airplane is completely on the operator, and the revenue risk is completely on the operator. So just taking one successful policy and taking few elements from that is Now, instead of passengers, it's cargo. So maybe it can be something like 50% of your cargo capacity limited to XX number of tons would be guaranteed by the government as a viability gap funding. That way, it'll allow operators to start having more frequencies with aircraft, probably smaller aircraft, into remote tier 2, tier 3 regions. And as Dr. Sudhanshu was talking about today, the biggest challenge is perishable cargo. And if you want perishable cargo, they're coming directly from, for example, the agri-produce, which you will not find in tier 1 cities. So you need operations into tier 2 cities, and that will serve perishable cargo like agri-produce, certain amount of that. But then operators don't want to go there because there is a risk. So if certain elements from the RCS Udan passenger can go into Krishi Udan as a policy, it can help remove a lot of risk and a lot of anxiety in operators, giving them the opportunity to start operations. To answer your cargo road transport versus the air transport challenge, I believe India's land transport infrastructure, rail or road, is so good that it does pose a challenge to air transport. But it does not solve connectivity to the more remote parts of the country, places which are very mountainous, places where road infrastructure is a challenge. Road availability is also a challenge simply due to landslides or other stuff. And then if you look at certain parts of India, they are almost geographically distant from the mainland, and they'll have to go through other countries to come in, which a direct road connectivity cannot. So while road and rail transportation can be a challenge, there are certain benefits with air transport, especially in the geographically challenged, geographically remote regions, for example, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, where you have to go by the slow mode of transport, which is sea transport, and for perishable cargo, where time is important and land transportation just cannot give you that time value.
How Embraer is preparing to leverage these demands or these opportunities?
With our solution, the Embraer 190 freighter, which has a range of about 1,900, 2,000 nautical miles, which is much more than a turboprop. And it's got a cargo capacity that is lower than the 737 or A320, but we also have 23% lower costs. So we have lower costs, which means lower risk. We have more range than a turboprop, which means we can fly further. And so we can cater to India. If you look at India, India is 1,500 nautical miles north to south and 1,500 nautical miles east to west. A turboprop can fly only about something like 500 nautical miles, which does not cover the entire region. It's got small capacity. But then if you want to put a large narrow body like the 320 or 737, it can fly the distance, but then you can't fill it on all the routes. So this is a solution that comes in where if you go to smaller cities, it's easier to fill. Cost of operations is also lower, but it has the range to cover the whole of India and even fly to neighboring countries like the Middle East and Southeast Asian.
How is the response from the operators for some of your solutions?
It's good. We have publicly announced Astral as the launch customer for the Embraer 190 freighters, where they've signed with the leasing company Nordic Aviation Capital. And so we have started converting the first airplane into freighter. So once that's out and then we have all the operations kicked in, we're sure that when the world gets to see the benefits of this aircraft, it'll come in naturally.
One last question. What is your message for ACFI as an association that is pushing forward the industry's interest towards the policy advocacy, for example? What is your message for it?
Message for them is a lovely forum and a lovely conclave that's happening out here. And in my personal observation, since I've been following the Indian aviation segment very long, is somehow cargo is not seen as very glamorous. And because it's not seen as very glamorous, it is also a little hard to attract quality talent into the system. It doesn't mean that, the system isn't good. It's just that for quality talent to come in is that lack of perception or lack of awareness about the cargo side. So for the younger upcoming generation, education, awareness about the cargo, incentivizing some of the brightest minds to come in may help solve some of the issues that we have heard today at the conclave. Challenges that are facing the air cargo industry through better exposure and education can bring in more talent into this industry rather than going into the typical engineer and doctor professions that all of us are used to.
Vasuki, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.